Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of True Say with CBJ, and I am your host Cherno. In this episode, I had a fantastic conversation with the amazing Dr. Neneh Sallah. She has a PhD in human genetics, she's a data scientist, a health and education advocate, and a mother. During our chat, Dr. Sallah and I shared our experiences as new parents, especially in living in places like UK and Sweden, where support can be very limited. She discussed the transformative journey also of motherhood and the importance of effective communication with children. We also delve into her fascinating work in human genetics and genomics, where she focuses on understanding our genes and their impact on our health. Dr. Sallah provided valuable insight into how our genetic makeup can influence our vulnerability to various illnesses. One of the most intriguing aspects that caught our attention was the significance of African genetics. Dr. Neneh Sallah shed light on the fascinating complexity of African genetics. She emphasized that while genetics is well understood in some population, there is still much more to explore and understand about the diverse genetic makeup of African populations. She also explained how understanding these genetics variation can have important implications for healthcare and disease prevention. As part of this exploration, we had an intriguing discussion about genetic testing and the impact of genetic makeup. Dr. Sallah discussed how religion can promote healthy lifestyle habits and how science can support and complement religious teaching. It was fascinating to explore the intersection between science and religion with her insights. So, if you're interested in hearing more about the challenges and the beauty of parenting, the fascinating world of science and genetics, and the intriguing connections between science and religion, be sure to tune in to this episode with Dr. Neneh Sallah. All right, and we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Neneh Sallah. Welcome to the show, Neneh.
A pleasure to be here.
It's really I'm really grateful because I know you're very busy for you taking your time to actually be on the podcast. So appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. How are you? How are you feeling? You told me you had a flu recently. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, much better. I had a really bad cold, and then, the weather in the UK has just been strange. I mean, yeah, for most people, it must be normal. We have rain, but it's summertime and it's just raining, cold. So, it makes recovery a bit slower.
That's true. I recently, I get traumatized when I actually hear flu because I don't know what I had recently. It was flu or influenza or whatever it was. Just in the Ramadan, like the last 10 days, it was like I've never been this sick in my life. Like it was so bad. And because I'd never really been sick before moving to Sweden. So like I never understand like why. Is it like you say, is it actually because of the weather? Like the warm countries, you don't get sick that much? Or is it just, does it have something to do with some other stuff that I don't understand? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think in general, illness is a combination of things. The environment definitely has a role to play. I think, now that everyone's talking about climate change, for instance, we'll see how these things make, a difference in how people get sick, but also just you as well, where you are. I mean, if you have a lot more going on and you're stressed, then your immune system goes down, or you're busy, you don't have time to eat. So, all these things work either to help you get better, or, they make you feel worse.
I mean, also it's like, but not only even me, because now that, being a parent, I get scared, because the way I was feeling, for example, it was so bad. When I look at my daughter, I was like, if she gets what I get, like, I don't know how she's gonna survive, but somehow she did. She didn't even get anything. So do you feel that same way also?
Babies are resilient. I think they're a lot stronger than we think they are. They're probably stronger than us. I mean, I felt terrible. Like colds, people take colds for granted, but colds, they beat you up. So I was feeling really, really ill over the past few days, but my daughter, somehow she managed to, she had a bit of a fever, but she seemed to be doing a lot better than me. She was cheerful. She really was a trooper through it. So I think, it's a lot harder on us, I guess, because we're not only trying to look after ourselves as parents, but we also have other people to care for.
Yeah.
That makes it more challenging.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Well, this is a great way to start the podcast.
Talk about our children
Talk about a cold. I
and
know.
parenting.
I know. But yeah, we're gonna get into that more even because when I first started this podcast, you were actually like the first one in my mind that I wanted to talk to. But I have to admit there was this fear of like, what am I gonna talk about with her? Because like I am so into and so fascinated by what you study in your world, when it comes to biology and the human genetics and all these things. But I was just like, I don't think I have enough information to be able to, have this conversation. But also, I was like, you know what? There's other things we can even get into, beyond just our professional or backgrounds or things like that. I was like, we could talk about our experiences, right now, the things we're going through as because we recently both became parents also, which is something fascinating. You know what I mean? So yeah. So, but now I got the fear out of the system now to finally to just come and face you to have a good conversation. Yeah.
I mean, it does become a bit intimidating because, science can be so, it can seem so, abstract. And, if you're not in it, you can feel so disconnected of the way it's communicated. But I think that's been changing a lot. I mean, as we've seen with COVID, a lot of effort has been gone into trying to explain things to the masses. But also social media has been a huge driver of, and has been helpful breaking down, messages and barriers. And I think us particularly as scientists need to, we're already doing this, but definitely have to do a better job of breaking down these barriers and, bridging the access to what we do. Otherwise, how will you know the value? How will you know, its use in, its usefulness in day-to-day life? So I think it's really important to have these conversations.
Yeah, it is.
I'm always happy to talk about it, and I try to get down to the nitty-gritty. I believe if you really understand something, you're able to break it down so that even a 5-year-old can understand it.
Yeah. I hope my 3-pound brain can understand because, growing up, I've always feel like, because I studied the Quran. So I've always felt this thing that I was never been able to be in a room, for example, with you, because you're going to be talking about science and all these things. And then I can't understand. So, my whole adulthood, it's been like that, trying to be in rooms like that because I've always been so curious about everything. When you learn the Quran, in the Quran, there's so many things that exist there, biology, everything that you can literally think about exists there. So some of these things I know in the Quran, but in details, maybe you will be able to give me a better answer or a better, talk about it in details where I can understand the science part of it, So I've always feel like I need to learn more. That's why I'm even trying to do this podcast, by trying to, get more knowledge and then talk to people also who can teach me about certain, about things like these things. So, I think it's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I feel like learning is continuous. It's good to try to continue to enrich yourself and ask questions, because how else can you be, more wholesome? I mean, without speaking to people, without, venturing out and, trying to read and understand what's beyond what you've been taught.
Yeah.
So this is really important.
Yeah. So I mean, you've worked really hard as a PhD. Like what you have, it's something probably very, very difficult to get. Especially in the field of science, biology. I think is such a complex thing. But also you've became a new parent. And parenthood is such a transformative thing. It kind of shape your understanding of a lot of things, love, sacrifice, and, responsibility and all this. So how has being a parent been, how has it been for you so far?
Like you said, you hit the nail on the head. It's been transformative. It's been absolutely, beautiful, humbling, challenging, but overall, a really fulfilling experience, the one thing I've learned, which I generally find it difficult, even before having a baby, was to rely on people for support. And the one thing that's been really important, is to be able to trust and leverage the support of other people as a parent, because it's not easy. And the one thing we take for granted, especially those of us coming from, more African or other cultural backgrounds, is it takes a village. And it really holds true. And, you don't realize it, until you have your own child. Especially for those of us who live outside of the Gambia, for instance, the support isn't as, we don't have as much support here.
True.
Here being in the UK and Sweden as we would back home in Gambia. So, any chance that we get help, I embrace it with like open arms. But also another thing is, I've learned to trust myself and trust my instincts as a parent. It's a lot of learning. There's no handbook. And everyone's experience is completely different.
Yeah.
The type of person I am, I like to listen to other people's experience, but also and use that, but make decisions based on how I'm feeling and how I've observed my child.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, I guess, talk between you and your baby. It's unique to everyone.
Yeah. True. It's been challenging, even for me being in Sweden here, like I don't know, it's been a very crazy experience because, there's no help. So it's always between you two, dealing with it. And I still have that cultural, DNA in me that, trying to find ways to get help because that's what I know. But you don't find it and, you don't get any sleep, and you got to work. So it's a very stressful thing, but also it's beautiful because when I finish my 9-to-5 job, the first thing when I'm coming home, I'll be sleeping in the train. Sometimes I even miss my stop, but so I'll have to get out of the train and get into the next one and go back. But as soon as I get home and I see her smile, it's like such a, it's one of the best feeling,
Yep.
Makes me see love in such a different way,
Right. It's like, no one can explain this to you, but
No.
I don't think I've ever felt this way in my life. I'm at work thinking about, I can't wait to see her, even though I saw her in the morning.
I know. It must be like, has there been like some sort of influence, like parenting with your perspective on your work also? Has there been any connections or parallels, between the two?
I mean, they are parallels, right? But it's, on a deeper level because this is a human being.
True.
But, in terms of my work, when I have a project, for instance, I take full ownership on it, and the onus on its success depends on me and, how I nurture it, how I, how I put a team together and leverage everyone's strengths to make sure this project succeeds. I mean, I suppose it's somewhat in a bit like parenting. So, me and my husband, I rely on him to do certain things, even though as a mother, you're usually the primary caregiver.
True.
I mean, it's just natural. It's just the biology because you're the one who, mostly, not always, right? Because every situation is different. But in my case, for instance, I feed the baby, because I'm still a nurse. I'm still breastfeeding, so I'm still nursing. So, I tend to spend most of the time with the child.
Yeah.
But there are other areas where, my partner does better than me, and him and my daughter have a different type of bond in that way. So I make sure that I leverage that. I leverage that, right? And, it changes. Like every stage has different things.
Yeah.
And as they grow older, I say the first 3 months I was like on zombie mode. It's just like, let's keep this child alive and let's not go, insane or, let's survive. First 3 months was on survival mode. But now it's different as, the baby, my daughter's developing her character, she's expressing her needs in different ways, she's walking and running around, keeping me on my toes constantly. So, I think I don't like to use the word balance because I think balance is unique to everyone and it's somewhat challenging. But as long as you find some ground where, the roles in the parenting are somewhat distributed in a way that favors you and your partner, and of course the child, then it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's like that's very true, because for me also, and my wife has been it's almost been the same thing. It's just, of course, there's still a very different. There's another issue when it comes to our different cultural background, because she's from here and I'm from there. Where maybe you and your husband, you guys both from Gambia, so you almost have the same cultural thing. I think so. So it's always been, because here it's different. Like even though I always tell her that there are certain things you have to do more than me, because of work and and all these other things, and I'm there for you as much as I can, because it's also my duty to be there to help my wife. Even in our religion, in Islam, the Prophet was always there for his wives, to make sure that they feel good, they're happy, So I help with the other things, as also with the cooking, with the cleaning in the house, to make sure that everything is right, But also one of the things that I kind of been feeling a lot more is my relationship with my mother. Like I learned the Quran, and there are certain verses in the Quran that I know, but it didn't make sense to me until I became a parent. There's a verse in the Quran where God talks about, like, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, like basically giving you that order that not to worship anybody but him. But after that, he immediately said, and be good to your parents. It's such a fascinating thing. Like, he could have said anything else, like pray, fast, do this, whatever. We said, be good to your parents. So even recently, I started trying to build my relationship with my mother so much, because I feel like being here, we talk on the phone time to time. We don't really spend a lot of time with each other. I'm like, I just want to spend more time with you. And she's been so happy with that. So how has it been for you, like your relationship with your mother also? Has it been something, have you looked at her differently? Have you seen her, I don't know, more appreciative, I guess?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've always had a good relationship with my mother, but if anything, it, having a child has brought us even closer together. I kind of see things from her lens, things I didn't understand before, the fact that, she cared too much, or she was overly anxious. I can see myself already worried about what my child is going to do when she's 15 and she's only a baby, because, you have this instinct just to protect.
Yeah.
You have this thought in your mind that now that you have this child, the child belongs to you, which is somewhat true, but not exactly, because everyone belongs. We don't belong to each other. We belong.
But it's still our responsibility to make sure that they.
It's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes. But, at some point, especially as they grow older, we still try to overparent. I would say that, like, my mom still parents me, and I'm I'm an adult. She's telling me what to do and what not to do. But I mean, I didn't understand it before, but I certainly have a huge sense of appreciation for that. But that's one thing. Another thing is, I do not know how I would have survived working full time without my mom as well, because she's been support both my husband and I. And that has made a huge difference, even for the little things. The little things being, I haven't slept all night and I just need 1 hour of shut eye before I go to sleep. My mom will take the baby and just give, just that is a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, true.
And then just, her guidance, because, it's fair that we ask each other. So each other being, us new parents, we ask each other for advice, but who better to ask for advice than someone who's successfully parented
exactly
7 children.
Exactly.
I was watching an interview somewhere. I think it was Michelle Obama who said, yeah, it's great to ask your friends for help, but why not ask the mother who has successfully raised kids,
Exactly.
all on the right path,
True.
So I think, there's a lot of wisdom to be gained, but also I feel her in ways that I've never felt her before.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that, she's around to witness and share this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That sounds great. And like I've already said that, talking about you having a PhD, being a doctor, and, being married, now also having a child, it almost felt like, like in my point of view, like it's been like, I'm very impressed with how your life has been, even though I don't know the details of it and everything. But, on the outside, it feels like everything was even like almost planned the way you did it. And where we're from, there's a lot of expectation, on how women is supposed to be. You go through marriage, but then you're still going through school and earning this PhD, which is something so difficult. And I know there must have been certain challenges, and obstacles that was, on your way. Like, so how, if there were, like, how did you deal with those challenges?
I mean, there were obviously challenges. A lot of people expect that it's, you get, especially from our background, you get married young, then, you pop the babies, and then you stay at home and be a homemaker, or you're just, you have the traditional wife role. I was never really that too much of a traditionalist. I wanted to succeed educationally, not only because I wanted to learn, but because I wanted that added, freedom that I didn't see other women around me have because of marriage. Right? At least this is how I saw marriage as a child and even as a young adult. I just saw that people got married and then they were trapped. Well, not when I say people, women in particular. Yeah. They were trapped by the confines of society and all the expectations. And I was like, well, education gives me that route to freedom because I have that financial independence.
Exactly.
Well, I was always bent on making sure that I pursued whatever opportunity presented itself. I mean, the plan, I never had, okay, I need to do a PhD, but the opportunity presented itself and I, of course, jumped on it. So I just wanted to be educated. So however I got that and wherever that took me, I was always willing to take the opportunity. That's one thing. Second thing is I had, huge support from my parents. Like they never pressured me to either get married or not get married. They just wanted me to succeed in life. Yeah. And that made a huge difference because I can imagine being in a family where, everyone's just focused on you getting married to the point where you just feel like this is what I have to do to please everyone. Thirdly, my husband was very supportive. I suppose he saw the value in me having to study because, foresight is way more useful than hindsight, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, you're like, okay, if she studies, then she becomes, more fulfilled and we can just have a better family. Like at the end of the day, this is the future of not only us as a couple, but us as parents who are family.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, how I manage these challenges, just tuned out the noise from everyone who didn't matter to me. The people who mattered to me were my immediate family.
And they were supportive.
And they were supportive. And, I'm someone who's always been, never been too much shaken by other people's views of me.
I noticed that about you always.
I've always been very secure in my views about myself and in my decisions. And when I'm not secure about my decisions, I consult those who I feel have my best interest. And that has worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I've always noticed something about you. You've always had this, like, I'll just do what I have to do. It's always in your face. You know what I mean? So yeah, but I want to just kind of go back a little bit, of course, you talked a little bit about, that your education just is something that you just had to do. But when did you realize, that you wanted to just go to the way of being a scientist, especially in the field that you're in, with, field of genomics and human genetics and all these things? What led you to that?
So when I was a child, I guess, when you're young and in school, they're like, oh, if you're smart, they put you in science, but mainly to be a medical doctor. So the idea of being a medical doctor and helping people had always appealed to me when I was younger. Whether it was TV or I'm not really sure what it was, but I always knew I wanted to help people. And so medicine made sense to me, right? So when I finished high school, I went on to work at the MRC in the Gambia, which is a research institute, scientists. That's when I guess I was introduced to the world of science. At that stage, it still didn't occur to me that someone like me could be a scientist because all the scientists I saw were old white men. So, and when I say old, I mean like gray-haired men.
This was in Gambia at that time, or?
Yeah, in Gambia at that time, all the people who were, who had like PhDs were either old white men or just older men.
Yeah.
Then I met a young, I guess she was a young woman, Gambian woman scientist. And she inspired me a lot. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she was like my big.
Sorry about that.
And so when I saw that, it occurred to me, okay, well then, being a scientist is possible, and you can do that before you get really old, because to me, no one wants to study forever. No. So that's when it really occurred to me. But then going into genetics and genomics, I found this as an opportunity because, in the Gambia, a lot of people have all these infectious diseases. So I was like, okay, maybe I could study something that could help reduce the level, fight these infections, save people's lives. But it's still hard to figure out what to do. So I'm like, okay, let me do something that no one here has expertise doing. People were studying other areas of infection, other areas of public health, but no one that I knew was studying human genetics and genomics.
Okay.
And I was advised that this is an area to go into because it's leveraging computer science, leveraging technology to study disease as well. So, fast forward, there was a PhD opportunity in that area, and I was able to win a scholarship to go and do that.
Yeah, I think it's great because for me, I've always been fascinated, like I told you earlier, by biology. You know what I mean, with the human genetics and all these things. Because as I said, reading the Quran, I've always see how God even talks about in detail on our evolution and all these things. I find it really amazing. But which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to someone like you, because you are very close to it. You see the details of how our genetic works, how viruses work, and all all the diseases, because he always talks about that we getting sick and how complex it is. But I've kind of just want you to explain to me how complex is actually our genetic makeup. You know what I mean? Like what makes it so fascinating for you to study?
I mean, it's complex. If you think about it, there's as much as it's complex, it's very simple in the sense that there's how many billion people in the world now? 8 billion.
Yeah.
The DNA is like our blueprint. But essentially, it's 99% identical, more than 99% identical.
All of us.
All of us.
Okay.
So to think that maybe just that 1% is what sets us apart, it's fascinating. And that 1% makes a huge difference in all of us. I mean, it's what shapes our appearance. It's what makes you black and someone else white. It all comes from that 1%. It's what makes someone tall and someone short.
Yeah.
So from, just knowing just the angle of knowing about humanity and knowing about selves, I think that is very, very interesting. Secondly, it's also the thing that determines, for instance, things like some diseases, why some people get them and why others don't. So that to me was the angle that was quite fascinating when it came to research for me. Why is that using, I don't know, any infection, for instance? Why is that, let's use a cold. Why is that, when someone gets a cold, they get really ill, whereas someone just resolves it.
Doesn't get ill. True.
Yeah. Doesn't get ill. And it was the same with COVID. Why are some people dying and other people not? I mean, while there could be a variety of factors, studies did show that, some of your genetics might have to do with why, diseases are at a higher rate for some people.
But do you guys actually, is in part of your research, do you really understand why these things happen, or is it still some sort of a mystery, with that 1%?
Yeah, I guess it starts off as a mystery, and depending on what disease area you want to study, whether it's cancer, whether it's infection, you just have to go deep. And this can take several years. It takes several years. It's very expensive to do these studies, and you have to do the studies in a lot of people, right? Okay. So just looking at, 5 people doesn't cut it. No. So you need to do the study in thousands of people to be able to make a conclusion to say, okay, we looked at 10,000 people and we saw that people with this type of genetic makeup have a higher likelihood of getting infection compared to people with this type of genetic makeup.
Okay. Have you ever kind of test yourself to know your own genetic, like your own genetic, to know like when it comes to your health risk and all these things? Have you done it?
I've done it, and I did it. I did mine in 2012. It was one of the first things I did as a PhD student.
Wait, is it that easy to do? Like, how do you test it?
Now it's simple because there's companies who do that for you. While I'm not marketing or promoting any of them, I did a test called 23andMe. Disclaimer: it's not an ad or promotion.
I'm gonna have to check this out to go check myself.
So what I had done was both ancestry, because your genetic can tell you where you're from, right?
Yeah, when you do your DNA ancestry, yeah.
So I did. So they have an ancestry part, and they also have a health risk part. But you also have to know that these things, they're not 100% accurate.
Okay.
So the information you get is as good as the data that's in. It's like a database. The more that there's people in it, the more accurate it becomes. And it's less accurate for people of African backgrounds, because we don't do the test as much as white people do. And also, genetics is more understood in white people than it is in Africans, because we're more complex than white people.
Why?
Our genetic makeup is more complex than white people. It's just the structure.
That makes me more curious now. And why?
Yeah. It's just a fact. It's just our genetic makeup is, we have a lot more differences in the way it's combined than white people. So we're harder to study than white people. White people are more the same than we are. Okay.
That changes a lot of things.
Yeah, white people are more the same than we are. We're like, so, but then, I feel like it's a fact, but it also doesn't surprise me, because if you just look at the African continent, for instance, and just looking at a small population like Gambia, look at all the, the tribes we have, the people, just look at across the continent, how different we look as people. And we tend to identify based on our ethnic groups. But our DNA is also reflected by our ethnic groups, which is interesting. So if, let's say, I was to do a DNA test, you're to do a DNA test, and someone from another, country or, group
in Africa,
or even within Gambia was to do a DNA test, me and you, automatically our DNA would get closer together, because we are not only, from the same country, but we're from the same tribe. And so we share genetic background.
But it's so weird, because, I always go back to, of course, my Arabic and Quranic teaching, because, when God talks about creating Adam, which was the first man, he talked about that he kind of used every part of the world, which is every clay part of the world, whether it was red, blue, whatever color it was, just to mix it together and create this being, and there's this verse in the Quran that talks about that, that when the creation of Adam, like his color was kind of, this is not very, very accurate, but it's almost like black, like our color, the way we look like. So it's just very interesting that does that have anything to do also with how we are, like you said, how complex we are.
I mean, see, the thing is, that's a possibility, but no one's tested it. So it's a possibility. I mean, scientists believe that the world kind of, started from Africa. They believe everyone is from that source.
That's what I'm saying. You never could have started from there.
Yeah, everyone is from that source. So they believe that the source came out of Africa. So it's possible that, Adam did look more like that because this source.
Yeah. Because min hama'in masnoon, the verse in the Quran, min hama'in, it translates as this black clay. So whether you started from Africa or which other country you started from, because of that verse, just now that you said that, of how we are, could make sense. You know what I mean? Even though I'm not saying this is a very accurate thing, but, as we just believe, we read and we believe, but the Quran also is such a complex thing. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of translation and interpretation to really understand, all those things, but it's a fascinating thing. It's such a fascinating thing. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. But I also want to get into, in the world of, I know you one of your part of your research, you do a lot of research about tropical diseases. Can you kind of give me an overview on how, and like, these diseases and how do they emerge and how do they spread also?
I mean, so they're not all the same. Tropical diseases, I feel like it was used as a term to bring together diseases that occur in parts of Africa, parts of Asia, parts of Latin America. So places where there was a tropical climate.
Yeah.
Right? So like more hot, more rainy places. And they can be, there are different types of tropical diseases. There are those that are caused by things called vectors, and vectors could be things like a mosquito. So it means it needs something in between you and the actual infection, right? You and the bug. So for example, for something like malaria, the mosquito is the vector that's carrying the parasite. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand it. Yeah.
I'm just trying to break it down a bit simpler. Where some other diseases like cholera, the water is the breeding ground for the bacteria.
Okay.
So it's like unclean water. And I think a lot of the time, most of these diseases tend to be diseases of poverty. Because, you don't have a lot of these outbreaks in more Western countries because water is clean.
True. I was actually listening to some guy called he's a scientist. I think his name is I forgot his name, but I think Peter Hotez. He's a PhD in tropical diseases in microbiology. I think in what's it called, in the Baylor College of Medicine. But he was talking about in Joe Rogan podcast, said that actually that some of these diseases actually sometimes can be in the in the G20 countries, like in the 20 wealthiest economies, but among the poor, some of the poor areas. Is that accurate?
That is, it could be. Because I mean, if they don't have access to sanitation, access to hygiene, because a lot of the time these diseases are as a result of poor sanitation, poor hygiene, and of course with climate change, we're seeing an increase, as places become hotter, it could be more favorable environments for some of the bacteria and parasites to thrive.
Yeah. But when it comes to these viruses, because like you said, with the mosquito and the water, because viruses, obviously they do, as I understand, their main objective is to spread, right? And, find hosts and basically spreading out. So it kind of just, even when I was kind of researching more and talking to you, I was just thinking about it, came to my mind. It's like, do they actually have some sort of intelligence, the way they move, or when they get into a host, like, are they actually really trying to kill the host, or their job is just to spread, isn't it?
Yes. So that's absolutely, I think you have a really good understanding of it. Their job is to survive. They don't want to die.
They don't want to die, no.
No, so they're trying to survive and multiply. But then, of course, that does not work with the human body, because the human body is also trying to fight.
Yeah.
Right. So, so they really, capitalizing on your immune system. They find ways of hiding. So they could, all the thing is that there's so many different viruses out there.
Yeah.
And not all of them have the same, modus operandi. They don't all work in the same way. Some of them, they want to live in you forever, and they do so successfully. So something like herpes virus, the moment you catch it, that's it. They live with you now forever. They're part of you. They're part of you. Herpes virus can cause different types of illnesses. So it's not just the one that everyone knows, the STD one, but there's also one that can come up like a cold sore, for instance. So
this can be cured also.
Well, there's no cure for it, but there's treatment. So treatment means that whenever you have a flare, you can use something and it can hide again. It can stay on.
It'll never just go away.
It'll never go away. Well,
It's
at least
crazy.
until there's new medicine. I mean, so these are active areas of research, right? So researchers are still trying to find
Hmm.
ways of, killing the virus, for instance.
Okay. Mm.
Whereas some viruses can be killed with treatment.
But like, as I said, are they are they very intelligent?
Yeah,
Because like the way they go from body to body or move from, I don't know, like, do they have, I'm just thinking as a, it's just very crazy. Like, are they actually intelligent beings? Do they have their own way of,
they do.
thinking?
They have their own strategies. So,
Mm.
some of them, what they do is they mimic what your immune system is doing. So they kind of use your immune system as a camouflage. So if you have, let's say, one of your immune cells that tries to fight an infection, they actually make themselves look like that. They're like chameleons. Chameleons?
Yeah.
Yep.
Almost camouflaging. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what they do to hide your body's defense. They pretend to be you.
Mm-hmm.
They're very smart. That's what they do. They pretend to be part of you, so you cannot detect them.
Wow. And how does that make your job? Does that make your job harder to with your research, basically by creating vaccines or creating treatment for all these things, or just figuring out how do they work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's been an area of active research by many scientists. It obviously make our jobs harder because we're trying to outsmart. And whenever you develop these things, they find new ways as well.
Yeah.
So
they evolve as we go, like,
and they evolve quicker than we do. So we just have to try and find the best ways of suppressing them. But it's like every time you develop something, they're like, "What? You brought this? You thought that we wouldn't know?"
My God! But it's very interesting. It's very interesting, but it's also very scary on how complex our human body is.
I mean, if you think about the common cold, for instance, how many times do you get a cold?
Yeah.
How many times do people get colds? I mean, that's because the virus is constantly switching up. Every time it comes in a population. That's why it's hard to vaccinate. Because, when you create a vaccine against something, you're hoping that the next time it comes round, because you've had the vaccine, your body recognizes it. Right?
True. Yeah.
Then the next time it comes, because it knows you had the vaccine against it, it switches. So the vaccine doesn't recognize it anymore.
So basically, it's like we're constantly working, but they're constantly just getting better. And we're constantly trying to create vaccines and create all this treatment. But like, when is it ever going to stop?
When it stop? Yeah. This is it. I mean, I guess if it did stop as well, we wouldn't have jobs now, would we?
No, we don't want that.
This is not for all viruses or bacteria.
Okay.
This is for some of them. Others, are slower. They're easier to treat, and there is treatment for them. So this is not for everything, but this is a handful of.
Okay. Yeah. So as I guess talking about vaccines also, COVID recently, was tragic, but there's also, I feel like since it happened, there's been like this divide, between the world. You have the anti-vaxxers and then you have the vaxxers. And I don't know, it's such a crazy world, like, because there's been a lot of misinformation on what works and what doesn't work. And, there's just been this talk recently since it happened. I feel like the whole world changed, even when it comes to children's vaccination and all these things. Like, how have you been seeing all this information kind of, come to you as a scientist, working so hard to with your research and everything? How have you been seeing the outside world, deal with this? Because it seems like everybody has their own information, on what they think is right, whether it's going to Twitter to find information or talking about what helps them with care themselves, or like, how have you been seeing everything?
To be honest, it's been cool. I feel like it's been an energy drain. Very, taxing as a scientist. It's been a very taxing time because I feel like people don't respect expertise. Everyone, I mean, so I'm not to bash people. So there's two things. One, I feel like perhaps, scientists in the beginning were not doing a good job of communicating, but at the same time, there were a lot of new things and scientists generally didn't know everything.
Okay.
And it's still an area that's evolving and we're still trying to find answers to questions. like you said, the wealth of information that was out there on the internet. To the ordinary person, how do you sieve through what is real and what isn't?
Yeah.
You had all sorts of doctors coming on YouTube saying X, saying Y, saying Z. But then, to the ordinary person, they don't understand whether this should be a trusted source or not.
Yeah, for me, example, like I was very confused because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I listen to a lot of, for example, Joe Rogan, people who come to his show, whether they're doctors who talk about that they're being silenced, they're not, the government are spreading information, so it's been a lot of things. A person like me, I don't take information immediately, but I do question, it does give me another perspective, like, okay, but why this and why that, but, maybe you can kind of, but continue, go ahead.
Questioning is very healthy and it's important. And I think I'm totally pro questioning. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am critical, but I like to respect the evidence. True. But I did find it very annoying that, one thing even scientists and doctors don't do sometimes is respect their expertise. I am not a vaccine expert, so my knowledge and ability to speak on vaccines will be quite limited to someone who's an expert in that field. It's like, let's talk. It's like, talking about beauty. As a hairstylist, I'm not the expert on makeup necessarily.
No.
But then, if I go online and wear my coat and talk about this, it's very easy. Like, words can be very powerful depending on how they've been delivered and who.
Sure.
So I think people who especially consider themselves influencers have to be careful with their messaging. And if anything, try and speak more on their area of expertise. Secondly, even as a scientist, it was a tough time because you're having to trust that these other scientists really know what they're doing with the vaccine. And also having to defend yourself at the same time, because people will attack you, or you scientists.
Of course, yeah.
You're bringing this vaccine. Oh, I'm not going to take the vaccine. I mean, my advice to people at the time was, do what is comfortable for you. And try and find the right people to ask if they are in your network.
Yeah. And it makes sense because, I think what you said is the best thing to even say. You give advice to people because it's scary when people are trying to force you or trying to label you as that you are a bad person or you are trying to hurt people. You know what I mean? And that's when it becomes scary. You're like, but why are you forcing me to do it? And nowadays, it takes a lot to, for people when you behave a certain way, or when you be in a certain way, they don't want to do it. You know what I mean? And I think the best way is to advise
that's
people.
Human nature. The more you tell someone you need to do this, all of a sudden they become adamant, like, actually no. The one thing that was really scary for me, though, is the fact that a lot of work that has gone into ensuring that people can take vaccines, like children, like their necessary vaccines when they're babies. I'm sure you've had to go through this with your daughter.
Yeah, I'm going through that right now.
But a lot of work that has gone into sensitizing people to take vaccines that are that have been taken for several years are now being undone because people all of a sudden don't trust these vaccines anymore.
Same thing right now, and because it's scary because you're like, I guess for me, it's like I don't know. So I end up even leaving my wife to have to deal with that. She's gone and read this book about vaccination, a children vaccination, where a couple of years ago you were taking maybe about 10 vaccines. And now you're taking almost about 27 different vaccines. So it's like, why is that large number for somebody whose immune system is still growing and is still developing? You know what I mean? So because I don't have so much information about it, I'm just like, look, I don't know. I don't know. It seems like some people are not doing it. It seems fine. But then if you don't do it and your child goes through, gets sick or something happen, and then you're like, why didn't I do it?
Yeah.
So have you been going through that too?
No, because I haven't, because I know, right? Because I guess I've been working in medical research since for the past 15, 20, almost, wow. For the past 15-ish years. So I know that, for example, in the Gambia, a lot of work has been done on vaccines and ensuring that they're safe. So, I mean, before, these vaccines are given to people, there's so many different stages of a trial. First, you need to make sure that the vaccine itself works. Then you need to make sure that, you know, in the lab, then you need to make sure that it works in people, but also that it's working enough and that it's safe, right? Because if it works and then it ends up giving you a different illness, then it's not safe, right?
True.
So a lot of these vaccines have been around for years. And the reason why there are more is because now we're, you know, there's new information coming up. You know, there's better ways of protecting ourselves against certain diseases. So a new vaccine has been created because that information wasn't available 5-10 years ago. But now that it's available, they've created a vaccine. And of course, before a vaccine comes to market, it takes several years.
Yeah.
Right? COVID things were different because everything had to be done at speed, one. And two, there was a lot of money thrown at it. But you can imagine how things slow down when there's not enough money. Imagine like building a house. The house can be complete in 6 months, but it can be complete in 10 years, right? If the money is there and it's flowing, why wouldn't it be ready in 6 months?
So because it was that fast, because there was a lot of money put into it.
A lot of money was put into it.
So it had nothing. So when you're developing the vaccine, it has nothing to do with just the research. But if the money is there, it's possible that it could be faster.
It has to do with research as well. Of course, it has to do with what you're finding. But speed, you know, you can, the more resources you have, so money goes into, you know, the research, the infrastructure, you know, paying people. So the more people you have working together, of course, things will be sped up a little bit. But of course, it has to do with the nature of whatever you're dealing with. That's true.
Yeah, I mean.
But I mean, I know that like other vaccines that we've been giving kids, we've taken them. They work and they protect you. Some of them, they protect you 100% of the time. I mean, yes, our immune system is still developing, but prevention is always better than cure, right? Do you want to wait to see what your immune system will do once it you know, it comes into contact with something? No, you'd rather not.
Yeah, I guess it's just has a lot to do with the social media also, because, you know, seeing a lot of people go through it and then getting sick, or some people say they died, or some people, you know, it's a very stressful thing. So you sometimes try to block it out and not to see, but it's so difficult to, you know, because it's always out there.
For example, my mom said to me during the COVID time, "Oh, I heard with the vaccine, 1 million people died who took it." I'm like, yes, but how many lives were saved? I mean, not saying that these numbers are true, but you always have to take numbers into context.
Of course.
You know? So if 1 million people died and 6 million people were saved, just think about what the odds are, right? And these are just hypothetical numbers. But I'm just saying, always when we think about numbers, you know, sometimes 1 million isn't a lot when you think about how many people are, you know, there on Earth. Yeah. And they're like, oh, you know, X number of people had a heart attack. I'm like, just 5 people. Whereas, you know, 35 people were cured. You just always have to think about the flip side.
Yeah. Like for me, example, I didn't take it, but not because I was refusing to take it, but it was more like, well, there was a point where I was like, no, I'm not going to take it, because I had a movie like production that called me. They wanted to give me a job, and I didn't even have to audition or anything. They just saw me and then they really liked me. And, you know, I got the part and everything. And last minute, you know, she was like, "Are you vaccinated?" I was like, no. Or I said, "Not yet." She was like, "Well, you have to be vaccinated by this week." I was like, "Really? Do I have to?" She's like, "Yes, you have to." I was like, "Okay, we'll get in touch in next week." And then the following week, she called me again. She's like, "Hey, Cherno, are you vaccinated?" I'm like, "No, I don't think I'm going to do it, because it seems like you're really pushing it, you know?" Yeah. She's like, "Yeah, but for you to be in the film, you have to be vaccinated." And then, you know, it made me to have to make a decision of, I really want to become an actor.
Yeah.
But like, you're really trying to push me to do something, you know, which is that human nature thing you're talking about. Like, why are you pushing me to do this? And then I ended up just turning it down.
Then you start to think that they have an ulterior motive. Like, why they want me to vaccinate so bad? I'm not going to.
And, you know, I don't even blame her. But I think, like, for me, I respect the people who are doing the research, you know, and scientists. But it's like, sometimes it's like the people who are working in this hospital, it's like the way they approach you. Like when my daughter was born, the way the nurse came so close to us to immediately tell us the shot we needed to take, it was such a creepy way.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at my wife like, why is she saying it that way? You know what I mean? Like, can you just say it in a very normal way? But why do you have to whisper it in a way? and just make it such a dramatic thing, like it becomes scary, like your child has to take this vitamin K or whatever. It's, like, it's like, why? So it becomes very suspicious. And I remember my daughter had night terror. I don't know whether you've experienced that yet. Oh my God, I'm telling you, it was the most scariest thing. And it was in Ramadan, and I remember I was praying my Taraweeh, and I think she was sleeping, and then she woke up crying and crying and crying. And my wife went in there, and she picked her up, and then they went to the kitchen. While I was praying, I can hear, she was trying to like get her attention, like snapping her finger, and then there was nothing. And as soon as I did my salam alaikum, then I hold her and I was trying to talk to her, and it was so scary. She was like, her eyes are open, but she couldn't see me. Yeah. We ran to the hospital. I've never ran and called God this much in my life. And then when we got there, the first thing, my wife was like, yeah, I think it's something to do with probably the vaccine or whatever that she just took. And then I went off to the nurse, be like, yeah, this said some bad words and everything. And then the nurse who tried to fight me back by trying to protect the vaccine or whatever. And I'm like, this is what I'm saying. Like, why are you protecting it so much? But even though like that's not the kind of person I am, just because of the situation was so stressful, it just makes you, it was just very, just very close to it when it happened. So it just made me really scared,
And you need to find a reason for why it's happening. So your brain made that connection. Must be this.
Yeah, that's true. So I also want to ask, like, because we got into a little bit about human genetics and all these diseases and viruses, but as you are studying these things, as you're making your research, how has it influenced your view, on your relationship, of course, between religion and science? Has it enriched your faith, or how has it been for you?
I mean, I wouldn't say it has enriched my faith, but there are a lot of things that just make sense. I'm like, this is, in the Quran or prohibited because it makes sense.
Like, for what example you mean?
It makes natural sense. I mean, in terms of, for example, I don't know, like, let's not talk about infection, but let's talk about other types of diseases. So things like high blood pressure, heart attack. So these are called, disease, non-communicable diseases, obesity. I feel like a lot of these, even though, your genetics sometimes has a role to play, other environmental factors have a role to play. One of the big ones being your diet.
Yeah.
I feel like Islam tends to promote healthy lifestyle, tends to promote,
of course,
being moderate and balanced. And, you could see how this could affect, your whole being, how your whole system. I feel like every part of the body is there for a reason. And I feel like religion, emphasizes this in so many different ways. And I think for me, that has become more apparent. I mean, the science just provides the evidence for the things that have been said, right? But people see religion as something that is, in general, as it's not tangible.
Yeah.
It's something that it's like a book. Most of the scriptures are books of guidance, but the science provides the evidence to support what the guidance is saying, and that's how I've seen it. I don't think it's one against the other. I remember when I was younger, they're like, oh, if you're a scientist, then how come you believe in God?
Exactly, and that's why I'm asking you this, because I always look at it like we need a lot of Muslim scientists, because if you study the Quran and understand it and you see the science of it, like, of course, like I'm saying, that's why I asked, it has enriched your faith, but you should look at it like, be like, wow, like this is fascinating. And I'm sure you already seen certain things, mind-blowing things with your research that make you feel that way, because when there's this thing like, with science and religion, there's always been an issue for a lot of people, like to find some sort of a balance, between it. Because as you said, when you're a scientist and you're a Muslim, it's always be like either you're an atheist or you don't believe in, other things. And it's always kind of been like that. I don't know.
I still don't understand what the conflict is, because, like I said, the
Exactly.
science is proving what this is saying to me, at least. That is my perspective. But then again, I'm also biased because my faith has always been ingrained in me. So perhaps I'm also looking for ways to make it more secure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to looking for ways to say the religion is wrong, the science is right. I've always been approaching it with, the religion is saying this and the science is backing it up.
Yeah, and exactly is exactly that, because there's this Dr. Zakir Naik. He always said that the Quran, for example, is not a book of science, but it's a book of science, like SIGNS. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's so many scientific facts that are in the Quran, even though it's not in detail, but science now is kind of explaining it and showing it. Even though science is evolving, because certain things are theories, and then after a while you discover more things. But the Quran has always maybe said something that is like, for example, when it comes to talk about how the baby was, it's been made in the woman's belly, talk about the 3 layers, that's all those verses are in the Quran. Yeah. And to come to it now, you say like, okay, so this existed 1,500 years ago, 1,400 years ago. How could have they possibly known this? Obviously, there's always someone who will probably try to find another way of debating you about it on why is it there, because most people don't believe that it's the word of God. They think it's the word of the Prophet Muhammad. But it's such a it's just like you said, the Quran is saying this, but the science is just giving a certain explanation and details to it, and I think that's what makes it more beautiful even.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, because there's this verse in the Quran, as you talk about the complexity, in Surah Al-Mulk, it says ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت. He said you will not see any inconsistency in the creation of the most merciful, like as in every single thing that's in the human body, it's so planned. Like he wasn't lazy when he was creating us, you know what I mean? Even though for some people it's hard for them to grasp, like there's a being that can create something this amazing, this complex, it's hard for some people to accept that, but at the end of the day, everybody has what they believe. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to religion also, for me, even like I'm learning things as I go. Like just because I memorize the Quran, it never meant that I completely take everything in. No, some things I question, something I don't understand, and
I don't know. Time. I don't know about you, but even I find that things that I learned as a child don't mean the same to me now as an adult. I don't know if I'm making it.
What do you mean? Can you explain that?
I mean, so what I'm saying is, you appreciate certain concepts a lot more when you relearn them as an adult than when you did as a child.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think, not only with religion, but I think mainly with religion, because when I was learning it as a young child, it was more so to tick the box, to fulfill my deen.
Yeah.
Right. But when you're learning it as an adult, you're really, because you're a child, right? You just want to go and play. You're not necessarily interested in, at least that was my perspective of childhood. You just want to be able to pray and then learn, I just wanted to not only to learn it to pray, but I just loved memorizing and I loved learning. So I wanted to be able to do things at speed and do it better than others. But as an adult, I have doubled down. You take a step back to try and understand the intricacies of a lot of the verses that you learn. Yeah. And I'm sure you apply it to your life in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has a different experience when it comes to it. Like for me, my story, like from 9, I memorized, and all that book in my head, I had no idea what it was. Even though I was praying, I was being forced to pray, I was being forced to learn, I was being forced to wake up at 4 a.m. But I understand them now.
Like all children, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but now as I grow, I start to learn more and understand it, trying to translate it myself, because I understand Arabic, but still there's the interpretation also, and putting it into your life.
But also the fact that you go through life and experience certain things in life, your understanding and appreciation of what you're learning is heightened because you're actually, this happened in my life and this totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it is what it is. But as we come close to this podcast, I just want to ask a final question as when it comes to what is your meaning of life?
Is that a real question?
I don't know. Is it?
It's a hard question. It's a really hard question. I think.
Take your time.
To be honest, I'm not even sure I have an answer of what my meaning of life is.
I mean, in your philosophical,
I think it evolves. It changes a lot with what stage of life I'm in. But if anything, one of my greatest, I think, purposes at the moment is to serve, and not only serve Allah, but to serve, people around me, and not just family. Like, well, obviously, my family is my priority, especially now being a mom. But I feel like I have a greater purpose to serve, a wider reach of people, especially people who are less privileged. Doing so in many ways, not just in a financial way or, through my research, but also through sharing, lessons, which is why I do enjoy speaking with people, which is why I'm happy to be on a podcast like this, because I feel like there's value in sharing lessons. There's value in sharing success, but even more value in sharing failure. Because even though we haven't spoken on failure today, but I think there's a huge value in sharing failure with others. It goes a very, very long way. Because, they can leverage it in their own lives. So I feel like, in a nutshell, my purpose is to serve.
Yeah. I think that's about it. That's about it.
I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I do too. I hope I did well, because
I was just gonna say, I think you've done such an amazing job. Like, I mean, you know so much about. I feel like, I don't know if you were learning about the science and the viruses to prepare for the interview, but I feel like your knowledge on it is on point, and it makes me really happy that you took the time and the effort to do that type of research.
Yeah, I'm as I said, I'm just very curious when it comes to these things. There are certain things I'm very curious about, and for this podcast to work, also I have to talk to people that I really want to talk to. So it's not just for the sake of she's a scientist, I want to talk to her. No, it's about me having certain questions. Even there, I feel like there are certain things that we didn't even get into, because I could have sit here for 2 hours.
I know,
but you're very busy. You're a mother, and even my wife had to go out to go do something so I could even have this conversation.
Yeah, same. My husband is the baby.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just very curious about your work. I think it's, like I said, it's such a fascinating thing. It's such an amazing thing. And if I would able to study anything in the future, and I'm still trying to get my education, it would probably be in that field, just to kind of gain a lot of knowledge about it, because, philosophy also is such an amazing thing. I've always listened to a lot of philosophers back in the day, and it's amazing, and I've been also taught by a lot of people who learn these things, and not the biological part, but the philosophical part, So yeah, so I'm really happy to talk to you. I really learned a lot, and I hope we will probably do this again, for sure.
Yeah, I would certainly love to, and then we can touch on the things that we didn't cover this time around.
Yeah, and if you have any questions too, you can always bring it my way also.
No, but I mean, I really enjoy the way that you do these podcasts and the range, the diversity in your topics as well. It's really refreshing. And the fact that you also bring in...
can you say that again? I think we had an internet connection problem.
Yeah.
The fact that?
Yeah, I think I said the fact that you bring in and you add on Islamic views is very enriching and makes it wholesome and informative and insightful for me, and I'm sure for your audience as well.
Thank you. Just trying to be myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's such a unique play on things, which is really nice.
I appreciate that coming from you.
Yeah, and the diversity of I'm not sure you heard, but I also said the diversity of topics from people that you've spoken to have been really, really good too. So congratulations to you as well, and I wish you all the success with this podcast.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to listening to other conversations and seeing you evolve on this platform.
Thank you. I also looking forward to to see your research and your work, spread out to the world. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gibbs.
All right, everyone.
Take care.
Goodbye. Goodbye, doctor.
Bye.